Welcome, everybody. My name is Mark Pew, Senior Vice President of Product Development and Marketing for Preferred Medical, and one of the co-founders of the Transitions. And I'm here with my buddy, Dr. Claire Muselman. Claire, you've got a new title since we've had the last video.
I do. I am now the Vice President of Workers' Compensation at North American Risk Services, and I'm also one of the co-founders of the Transitions.
Absolutely. It was a brainchild of a variety of people, but we've enjoyed having a lot of videos through this process. And one thing that Claire and I wanted to talk about was this whole management kind of style that's coming out of having worked virtual for 18 months and then emerging from that back into kind of a hybrid model. And maybe everybody comes back to the office, maybe nobody comes back to the office, maybe got a little bit. You're managing a whole big organization now, Claire, and a brand new organization that you've been drinking from the fire hose for the past 3 or 4 months. So what has it been like to kind of figure out what is the existing management style, what's the culture, and how do you assess the success of managers? Because that's much less objective than measuring the productivity of a data entry person where you can track keystrokes.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. So we are in growth mode big time. So it's really finding when we're going out to source talent, a lot of it starts with what's your mission, what's your vision, and where do your values come from? Because we're here, and in my specific organization, like I came from a group where we cultivated this amazing organizational dynamic focused around mission and purpose, which was that workers recovery unit. And they are thriving, doing awesome things over at Continental Western. So very happy to see how great that they're doing and all of the good stuff that continues to be in place. But that took about 4 years to build into this machine where people just feel seen, heard, acknowledged. And when you're able to make sure that your people feel that way, then they can go make our injured workers feel that way as well. And so it's a really big process of seeing who can, one, come into your mission and get everybody on the same bus, moving in the same direction. But even more so, how do you get leaders to also communicate that vision to their team and their leaders of leaders? And so when you start looking at the different levels and how does the telephone game actually work, I think a lot of it all stems around accountability. And as we look into coming out of a pandemic, and also as we look into Gen Z really coming into the workforce right now, the whole work from home, and I don't want to call it work from home, let's call it remote work, because people aren't necessarily going to sit at home. There were some cool things that I got to see during the pandemic of people renting houses and moving from state to state to state, where really, as long as you have an internet connection and you've got people doing their jobs and being held accountable, really, it doesn't matter where you're at. I could care less if you're at home. Maybe you're on an island in Fiji. Good for you. But a lot of it comes back to accountabilities and how do we hold each other accountable? Because I believe that accountability is one of the kindest things that you can do for someone, because not only is it empowering someone to be able to operate in a manner that they want to, but it's also making sure that they are progressing in the way that they're doing it. So from like a leadership standpoint, making sure that we are being resourceful for our team, our phones getting answered, payments being issued. What are we doing to drive the needle forward from a customer service standpoint? How do we make sure we measure that and that there is that trust but verify? In the same capacity, working with injured workers, holding accountabilities of this is what we're going to do for you, but this is what we expect from you in return. So I want you to call me after your doctor's appointment. Like, tell me what happened. How did things go? Are you nervous about going back to work? What's that like? But starting to establish those type of checkpoints to make sure that there is ongoing communication. Everybody is being held accountable. Oh, you did get your patient status report. Okay, can you take that to your employer, or are you going to scan it in? Can you take a picture of it with your phone? What does that look like? And coming out of the pandemic, again, we've been very heavily resourceful on technology. So there's a lot more checks and balances and trust and verify within the technology space. And so I think if organizations aren't going to be capitalizing on that moving forward, that's where we're going to start to see a big shift. And in that, I think you're going to see a shift in leadership and management style, because now we're going to see how well were people virtually leading. What did that look like? Was it a communication? Was it because we were on Zoom? Was it because of emails, newsletters, text messages, social media? How did you stay in contact with people to make sure that they felt taken care of and given a space to thrive? Now, from your seat, Mark, what did you see? What did you see during the last 18 months from a leadership standpoint within your own experience. And I mean, we also launched the transitions during the pandemic, which is a lot of leadership. That's a lot of different leadership styles going on and a lot of accountabilities, and everyone in the world is busy. So what did you see coming out of this?
Yeah, well, the transitions is an all volunteer organization, and that's a challenge. That's hurting cats because people got their day job, and then whatever they're going to do associated with that. Management has certainly been difficult. I've worked remote ever since I joined Preferred Medical about 4 years ago, and that's different than an office. I had always been in the office, but I traveled a lot, so I guess working from home really wasn't all that difficult. In fact, Preferred gave me a big monitor and an external keyboard and go, now I don't need that. I'm so used to working on my laptop in a hotel room or hunched over, the drop down TV tray on the airplane, that I just looking at a big screen just seemed kind of weird. I know, we had to go, our headquarters is in Louisville, Kentucky, and Kentucky went into the shelter in place very quickly. And so very quickly, we had to get everybody out of the office and equipped for home. And our IT team did an excellent job of doing that, getting them set up. And there were so many logistics associated with that. But then at the same time, we had to hire people. I remember a conversation with our CEO where, we had to hire a new customer service person, and she had never hired anybody without eyeball to eyeball communication. And she was actually pleasantly surprised. She said, we can't actually do this virtually. She had Zoom meetings. We shipped the equipment to them. They did all that stuff there. Never shook a hand, never did a hug, never eyeball to eyeball. And it actually was a surprise, I think, to everybody how seamless that could be. But so we got forced into the deep end. I don't know ordinarily that Preferred Medical or anybody else would have made the decisions about working remotely or telehealth or all the different things that we've learned. We probably wouldn't have done that without being pushed off the edge of the pool into the deep end. But once you did, and you realized you didn't have floaties, but you still remember the dog paddle, we figured out that we actually could survive on that. So it's been an interesting journey for sure.
I know it's interesting about that. So I finished my doctorate during this time period too. And I was actually talking to my doctoral chair a couple weeks ago. And he said, do you know what's funny? In the 5 years I've known you, you and I've never met face to face. And I thought that was because I consider him family. Like I talked to his wife the other night, like we all became, and there's a cohort of us. And he's like, so what do you think drives that? What creates that sense of unity and purpose? And I said, oh my gosh, you know how many times like we would cry or just be completely exhausted. Or here's another revision. And like the amount of work that went into this, it was all about like sharing a sense of purpose and camaraderie with our group. But he did something different because he's got one of the higher success rates within the university that I went to of having people actually complete the program. But he also sets up accountability checkpoints. So we would meet every Wednesday night and every Saturday morning. And you didn't have to go, but you knew you needed to show up. Like it was one of those, and you get to know these people from being in it all the time, where then you almost create your own little subgroups to help one another throughout the process. But again, I think it all goes back to like these accountability pieces and then showing up. So whether we all go back into the office space or it does become a hybrid space, how are we still showing up for one another and holding each other accountable? Now we have gotten to start traveling again, which I think is amazing. And I absolutely love seeing people again. But I do think that there's got to be some give and take between the two, because the younger generations don't want to be in an office the whole time. And now that there's some freedom and flexibility, I think as we look at the other generations, people kind of liked it. Like having that flexibility to just kind of do what you need to do. And as long as you're getting your job done and there's accountability check pieces and checkpoints throughout it, there's really not a reason not to.
Well, I have read something recently that actually millennials and Gen Zs were surprising in that they wanted to go into the office because they feel like they're going to not be able to participate in those water cooler conversations. Yeah. They're not going to be able to develop that collaborative kind of teamwork kind of thing. They're not going to develop those relationships, which surprised me. I thought for sure, they'd all be working at the pool, with shades on. But I've been reading some statistics that the younger generation actually really wants to get into an office. Now, it may not necessarily be the cubicles and the, office space is more that open California style kind of thing. But they miss that. And I know management is such a nuanced, soft skill. Not everybody is a manager. I've been around, all these years, and I've definitely had some really good managers, and I've had some other people that probably should never have been a manager. So it's not for everybody. You've been managing. I gave up management people a while ago, so I don't have any recent experience. You're right there in it. How do you differentiate those soft skills, those nuanced, the not necessarily being able to pin down objective data points that says you're a good manager or not? It's almost like a gut feel. How do you when you hire someone, when you're assessing someone, when you're trying to figure out how do you separate the wheat from the chaff, the good people that manage their teams well and the ones that are not? Because that's what we need coming forward. We need the, is it the wheat? I guess it's the wheat is the good stuff, right? The chaff is the stuff you throw. We need wheat, right? As far as the managers, how do you distinguish that?
So I think a lot of it stems down to emotional intelligence. And I think that's where when we look at how people come out of the pandemic, or we go into a more virtual world forever, it separates out the leaders from like the doers of management, of managing the work, and really focusing on how do you help people thrive within their own environment. And a lot of the times, I was just talking about this yesterday with someone where they're like, do you ever create a space for your people to just come vent? Because people should be able to vent up, not out, which I totally agree with. And it's very interesting to just listen to, okay, how do you provide intentional time and a space for people to be seen, heard, acknowledged, and valued? Because there's, 78% of employees haven't received a good job in over a year. So then when you aren't seeing people in an office and walking by people, for someone to have to reach out and tell you, hey, you're doing a great job, it has to be very intentional, because now you either call them by Zoom or Teams or whatever. There's so many different methods right now, but it doesn't take that long to make somebody feel acknowledged about doing a good job. And I think it's a very interesting time, because I think now we're all seeing the movement across the industry pretty heavily, where people are moving from different occupations. People have been reflecting for 18 months. Is this really what I want to do with my life?
Yep.
And now, okay, so then how do we assess? Who do we want? How do we go get them? There's 400,000 open positions in the insurance industry. Where are we getting them? We already knew that there was a talent gap to begin with, but now we have a freeze on hiring last year. And now it's literally everyone's running every different way. So where do you go to get this talent, and how do you make people want to be a part of your organization? My research showed that people really want a sense of meaning and purpose, and to understand how they belong to the collective good, what's something that's higher than they are. And I think that if you have an organization that does know who they are, what they want to do, how they're going to grow, and they're going to reinvest that into their people, that gives somebody an opportunity to be part of like a work family. And that's something like at NARS, that's something that we pride ourselves on, is that we consider ourselves a family. We're owned by human beings, like two human beings that I can call at any point of my time and just say, hey, can I talk to you about something? And they always make themselves available. Mm-hmm. And it's very different than some of the other corporate structures that I've been a part of in the past, where there's no way you would ever have access like that. But it's also then it's up to us as the leadership team then to go back and also reinvest that into our people. So do you listen to the people that are actually doing the work? Are their leaders actively supporting them in the processes and the methods that they need to be successful? Is your higher level leadership then supporting and coaching those leaders to do what they need to do for the people that are actually doing all of the day-to-day tasks? And I think that those soft skills and being able to see how the messaging and communicative information is shared and retained and then applied. And then how is that continuously reinforced over and over again for a positive work dynamic? Because a lot of people weren't that happy during the pandemic. There's a lot of negativity.
Found out, yeah.
Yeah. So then how do you create an environment that is positive? Because I believe that with every interaction that you have with someone, it's either going to move the needle forward and be a positive experience, or it's going to be mediocre or negative. And even if it's mediocre, where you don't really leave feeling great, but it's not bad, that's still negative because it wasn't a pleasurable experience. And not every conversation is going to be, but how do you make sure that your team feels that you hear them and that you are actually moving things forward? And then how do you communicate that back to them of, hey, here's where we're going. We might not be there right now, but this is what we're doing to get there. So hang in there, keep doing awesome stuff. Here's where we can improve, and let's all go together as a team and kind of reinforcing in that. But it's trying to find, how do you create that camaraderie, whether you're not in the office, because it's great when you can walk over and say, hey, Mark, just want to stop by your cube and say hi. There's those elements that aren't going to be there anymore, but then you get more intentional time when, if you call me or I call you, it's undivided attention time. So it's an interesting kind of dichotomy of what do we do next, and how do we really move everybody forward together.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I kind of heard you say, it was permeated through that, is that the culture of accountability, the culture of communication, the culture of authenticity, the culture of well-founded and well-articulated expectations. That is something that is fairly tangible, I think, and it really starts with, I guess, a mission statement, right? So I would assume that a lot of companies have a mission statement. I would also assume that in a large organization, very few people actually know it. And the mission statement may be not very achievable or understandable or digestible or actionable. It's something like, shareholders and whatnot. It doesn't really talk about the mission statement of that mission and purpose. And, I remember when you were going through your doctoral thesis, you mentioned one of the statistics to me that kind of surprised me and kind of didn't, that the need for the need for purpose, the need for meaning wasn't a generational thing. It crossed all age groups. And so, how do you, as we kind of close things up, how do you create that kind of tangible, you can touch it, you can feel it, what's expected of you, whether you're a manager, whether you're a manager of a manager, whether you're a supervisor under a manager, whether you're the data entry person, whether you're the VP. How can you create this kind of, I guess, just this, you walk into a company and it's also almost like osmosis. You get that it's not that squishy. It's not that intangible. There's also those tangible, here's what we do. How do you set that so that there aren't any, oh, you wanted me to do that at your annual review that you may or may not have now?
Communication and accountability again. So communication from a vision. So like, my purpose is to make good things happen for people. So that's my own personal purpose. It's been since I was super little. Like, I want to make good things happen for people. I happen to be in the workers' compensation space, and I'm going to use the WRU as my example, where their tagline is they make good things happen for injured workers. So it started with like, what is your personal mission? And then talking to the leadership team of, what do you believe you can actually deliver on? So what does it mean? What does it mean to make good things happen for someone? Okay, it means that we answer phone calls. It means that we get them the best medical care possible. It means that we show up when they need someone to talk to or just bend an ear to. It means communicating with the employer to make sure people are all on the same side. So it starts by taking that, like, how do you fit into the picture as yourself? And if you are unsure in an organization of how your role impacts others, go ask. I think that is one of the most easy things that we fail to do, is to go ask for what you want, ask for how you contribute, ask your leadership team or ask your peers, and like, just make the ask, ask and figure it out. But then understanding like your role is so important, because, and as leaders, we should be able to be communicating that, because you know what? Data entry and workers' compensation is incredibly important, because we have NCCI reporting, we have EDI reporting, we have like a bajillion fields that have to be filled out on a regular basis. And guess what? A lot of us don't have that automation that everybody wants. But then we do have human beings doing this job, and they're very important, because if we don't have them, we're missing fields, we're missing timeliness. There's just a lot of stuff that goes into that. So even with that, when we're talking about customer service, what kind of experience does somebody have when they call? And I've been on the flip side. This past year, I had a crack in my windshield that actually ended up going all the way across. And when I called, and my insurance carrier is Progressive for car and auto, whatever. And I got to talk to a human being. And the woman on the other end made me feel like a completely normal human being. It was very clear in communication. It was very easy to understand. And there was a lot of empathy with, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Okay, well, what's your vehicle? Oh, okay. And then just chit chat through that with, okay, so here's what we're going to do to get you fixed. And here are the accountability steps that we're going to take along the way. Like, I need you to take a picture and upload it for me. I need you to do this. Okay, perfect. Once you've done that, then I can do this for you. And I think that goes along the same lines of when you're working with an injured worker. Okay, you're off work. I need you to give me a copy of that note that says that you're off work from your doctor. Can you take a picture of it? Can you upload it for me? Okay, once I get that, I can start issuing you your benefits. Did you talk to your employer? Like, and we all come together. So same thing when we're looking at it from a leadership standpoint of, okay, do you understand the functions of your position? Do you understand how you can single-handedly change the trajectory of somebody's life by answering the phone on time? Yeah. By issuing their payment on time so that they have money in their bank account to pay their mortgage or their rent or to go get groceries or to pay for childcare. Like, do you understand that if you don't issue that payment, there's going to be a really bad ripple effect? Mm-hmm. Do you understand that if we don't try and get that doctor's appointment moved up, or we continue to issue those opioid scripts, there is a bigger ripple effect? And so that's where I challenge leaders to make sure that, especially in our space, that you understand the ripple effect. Like, you understand what happens if Joe, let's say a 40-year-old man with a shoulder injury, can't get off the couch and ends up starting to take narcotics, which ends up turning into, it could be something more, or he ends up drinking heavily, and his 6-year-old child grows up watching dad not get off the couch. Again, there's such bigger pictures that are illustrated. And so from a leadership standpoint, we should be able to communicate the higher purpose, make it consumable, tell it through really great stories of experience, and then cultivate that meaning and purpose through execution of, it really is the little things. When you answer the phone, do you say, hello, how are you? And stop and give someone the freedom to actually respond. And it doesn't matter who you're calling, whether it be somebody checking a bill status, an attorney calling to talk about a case. When do we actually show up with that human authenticity and power of human connection? Because that's what makes great leaders. You cultivate vision, you communicate it well, you actively listen, and then you help people feel empowered to make decisions that help cultivate this meaning and purpose within their own scope of control.
And that, in a nutshell, is how we have to manage now. It's not an option. The old school just is not going to work in a hybrid model. It's not going to work for the new generation. It's not going to work for a variety of different reasons. So that in a nutshell is how you have to manage it, which is not how I grew up. It was yeah. I was there before paper was invented. So, they were with the stone and whatnot. It's a different world. And if you don't change your perception, if you don't evolve and use these new, more squishy kind of, glitter, to borrow a phrase, kind of management styles, you're going to definitely be left behind. So yeah. I knew you'd have great insights. I'm just the old dude that's been around forever. So, having fresh blood and someone who's actually on the front lines right now is really important to hear from.
I think it's important that everyone knows that what they do matters. Mm-hmm. It matters. And how do you make that connection point and then cultivate it so that they feel empowered to make the good things happen?
Absolutely. Claire, always a pleasure. I always do something when we're hanging out.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Have a great one.